Good evening and welcome to the Claw Studio here at the Royal Opera House and to this insight supported by Rolex. I'm Sophie Rashbrook and tonight I'll be taking you behind the scenes of Boris Godunov. With its huge choruses and poignant arias, Modest Mussorgsky's opera is a visceral, shocking psychodrama exposing the corrupting effects of power and ambition. Based on Alexander Pushkin's play, which was inspired by historical events, the opera tells the story of Tsar Boris Godunov, a ruler haunted by guilt and slowly losing his grip. Meanwhile, an ambitious young man spies an opportunity to steal the crown. What lengths will they both go to in pursuit of power? Richard Jones's acclaimed staging returns to Covent Garden on the 29th of January with an awe-inspiring score conducted by Mark Wigglesworth. We'll dive deeper into the production over the course of the evening. But first, to give us a taste of the music, please welcome baritone Andriy Klimach singing the role of Shelkalov, accompanied by chief repetiteur Susanna Stranders. Thank you, Andriy and Susie. It's wonderful to get a glimpse of what we can expect on stage in just a few weeks. Now, I want to take us into the world of Mussorgsky's opera. To set the scene, please help me welcome music historian Marina Frolova-Walker. Hello, Marina, welcome.
Lovely to be here.
Yes, wonderful to have you. You're a professor of music history at Cambridge, specializing in Russian music. I want to talk first by talking a little bit about Mussorgsky, his life and his music. So we know he was born in 1839 in the Russian city of Pskov. He trained at the St. Petersburg Cadet School at 13. He had no formal musical training. So could you tell us a little bit about his background and his journey into music?
Yes, he was born on the estate of his parents, so he was of noble birth, and he became an officer. Yeah, so he became a very popular young man, very handsome, playing the piano very well, various mazurkas and waltzes, you know, and all the young ladies were admiring him. So not quite the character that we imagine him, you know, when he was writing Boris Godunov. So some huge change happened in his life. How did he get, from this popular officer into a composer, a genius, who only has basically one public success during his lifetime, which is Boris Godunov. And all the other works either remain unfinished or they are never performed during his lifetime. He dies at the age of 42 of alcoholism. So how did it all happen? Yeah, so one important moment in his life was meeting the great critic Vladimir Stasov, who wanted to, had this idea of creating Russian national music. And also Mili Balakarev, another Russian composer. They were all amateurs at the time. There was no professional education for music at that time. And so Balakarev and Stasov and Mussorgsky and a couple of other people that you might have heard of, such as Borodin and Rimsky-Korsakov and Cuy, they formed this little circle and started developing their ideas. So all of them had other jobs, basically, and they were just trying to experiment. And it was a very experimental time because they wanted to do something that didn't sound German, didn't sound French. They wanted to do something that sounded Russian. It was a time of cultural nationalism. And so they innovated. So that was all great. But then what happened socially to him? So in 1861, there was a reform. So serfdom in Russia was abolished. Which meant that Mussorgsky also lost his income, and I think his brother also took whatever was left of the estate. So Mussorgsky was basically left almost destitute and led this bohemian life, stayed with friends, writing these pieces. Some people thought he was a genius, other people thought he was a madman. So Tchaikovsky thought he was more than a madman than a genius, by the way. So that is basically the story, in a few words.
Great, it's a fine line between genius and madman, I find. What were some of his key influences? You mentioned a little bit about folk music. I mean, we hear a lot in the choral kind of sound in this opera.
Yes, when you talk about Mussorgsky, I mean, he obviously wanted to create this Russian sound. And at that point, there were still very few ideas of how to do it. So he was doing some very new things. And it's very easy to remember. He uses kind of three main elements in Boris Godunov. You will hear all of them. So one is Russian speech, because every recitative that you hear is actually based on Russian stress patterns. It's not imitating any kind of Italian recitative. It's not imitating any other nationalities singing. And also every character speaks in a different way. So if it's a comedy character, there's low speech and high speech. So when Boris gets agitated, his music completely changes. So he basically tries to almost notate speech in his music. And you just heard this arioso, and there were words like for example, утешение or something like that. So the Russian stress usually comes quite early in the word, and then you have unstressed syllables. So you can imagine if you wanted to translate this opera into Italian, you would have to rewrite the music as well because it wouldn't fit. And this is exactly what was done. There is an Italian recording from the 20s. So that's one thing. That's the language, the speech. The second thing is a folk song. The opera begins. The very first thing that you hear in the orchestra, in the bassoon, is basically an imitation of Russian, very long, drawn-out folk song. And it's supposed to be sad because the idea was that Russian, things are very bad always in Russia, and Russian people are always very sad. It's absolutely true. So he creates this idea, through this very sort of song, long solo at the beginning, in a very dark register. So he uses folk song. He uses also like lamentations, another genre of folk song, when the choir starts lamenting, asking Boris to please take the crown. We want you to be our Tsar. So they are started to wail, and that's also kind of folk style. So that's the second element, folk song, and the third element is Russian Orthodox music. So you will hear every time that there's some church character, so there's a monk, for example, on stage, you will hear a lot of kind of elements of Russian choral singing. Or if the Tsar is mentioned, or tsars, different tsars are mentioned at different places, you will also hear these kind of harmonies from Russian Orthodox singing. And part of that, of course, is the Orthodox bells. So you can't miss them. And then the coronation scene, there are these great bells. And he did two things with the bells. He did real bells, real church bells, but also he imitated the bells in the orchestra. And that was also his great innovation, because he wanted to represent through orchestral means the unpitched, kind of out-of-tune sound of bells. Because when you hear the Russian bells, especially little low ones, you cannot say which note it is. Is it an A? Is it a B flat? There's like about 40 different notes sort of mixed in there. And then he was trying to represent this by using dissonant chords and sort of orchestrating them also in this way that you have this kind of echo and rhythm to the bells. Rimsky-Korsakov helped him a bit with orchestration because he wasn't so good at that. But anyway, so this is the Russian kind of elements, so 1, 2, 3. So the speech, the folk song, and Orthodox music.
Great. And you touched on it a little bit there, but listening to his music, there's great beauty, but there's also a kind of raw, a sort of harsh quality that I think, is it fair to say some people attribute that to his sort of lack of musical training? But it sounds like it's all completely intentional in some ways.
It was totally intentional. The whole group of them, they called themselves the Mighty Handful, or the Mighty Little Band. They didn't believe in conservatory education. Conservatory education only was beginning in Russia at that point, but they didn't want to go to the conservatoire because they thought, well, they will just teach you how to write German music. We don't want to know that. They were trying to do everything the opposite of what the Germans did. They used different chords. They were trying to avoid various idioms and cliches. That's why the music sounds so raw. And so kind of unidiomatic, the tunes are hard to remember precisely because they don't fall into this sort of cliched idioms, say, of Italian opera. And also even various deficiencies. So he didn't learn very much about orchestration. And at the time, Rimsky-Korsakov thought, oh, this is really poor. So when Mussorgsky died, he reorchestrated the whole thing, made a very beautiful, sparkling version of it. But with time, people started seeking the real, authentic Mussorgsky because it actually sounds more modern somehow than this lush, romantic sound. It sounds more austere and more like in tune with the subject matter because, we have to time, I hope, to talk about the subject matter, which is very unusual. Because it's a kind of opera for adults, it's not opera for kids with this sort of fairy tales and various strange goings on. So this is really a serious historical drama, extremely pessimistic as well.
Could you just give us a little quick overview of the plot, just so we kind of set that out?
So it all happens between 1598 and 1613. There were 15 years in Russian history, which is called the time of troubles. And there were a lot of troubles. So this is where the time between two dynasties, the Rurik Tsar dynasty and the Romanov. And you probably know the Romanov was the last dynasty which ended in 1917. So, and between them, why, there was this gap because Ivan the Terrible, who was the last Zurich, managed to kill off all his heirs and potential heirs as well. So, sort of causing a miscarriage by hitting the wife of his son, then killing his son as well. Russian history is really, it's more unbelievable than any opera. And then there was only one son left, who was Fyodor, and Fyodor was a kind of mentally not quite healthy. He could not rule without a regent, and Boris Godunov first comes in as a regent, and then Fyodor dies, and so they decide to ask Boris Godunov. That's how the opera starts. You just heard almost the beginning of it, when the people ask them to become Tsar. Yeah, but then, of course, there is this story, this rumor that Boris actually killed another potential heir, who was called Dmitri. And this is why there's a possibility always of a pretender pretending that Dmitri survived. Believe it or not, in Russian history there were 4 of these pretenders, and one of them got to actually rule Russia. So one of them, and second one I think almost did, and all of them were also killed off. And even Mussorgsky, another character in the opera, he also was the Tsar, after Boris. So there's the whole string of events afterwards that we don't see. But anyway, so Boris is worried about this, whether he killed him or not, whether he sort of just told somebody to kill him. Obviously he didn't do it himself, but something is oppressing him, even as he is crowned. And then we go to the monastery, where a monk called Pimen is writing a chronicle of Boris's deeds, and he's writing these horrible things that happened, including Dmitri's murder, which he witnessed. And a young guy called Grigory decides that he might be Dmitri, and whether he believes it or not, or whether he's just an ambitious young man who decides that he could pretend to be Dmitri, but he decides to bring this into reality. And so to do that, he needs support of a foreign power, and so he goes to Poland. Polish-Lithuanian kingdom was extremely powerful. And with the support, he comes back. We don't see him coming back in this version, but Boris basically is already in a bad psychological state, and Mussorgsky is trying to unseat him. So he is trying to put these ideas of the ghost coming after him into his mind. So his mind deteriorates, and then the monk turns up and tells everyone about what happened, and Boris dies horribly. Sorry, spoiler. Yeah.
There we go. So we could talk, I think, endlessly about this. We've got time for one more question. I thought we can't leave this without just briefly touching on Pushkin and the significance of Pushkin in Russian culture, and perhaps why Mussorgsky was attracted to the play.
Yes, well, you can ask any Russian and they will tell you that Pushkin is our everything. We look for every single answer in our life in Pushkin's verse. So Pushkin is our Shakespeare. And he is responsible for the Russian language that we speak today, sort of more casual language, less formal language. He created it through a lot of translations that he did, and also a lot of original works. So his Boris Godunov is modeled on Shakespeare up to a point, but it's actually something very, very modernist. If you watch this play on stage, it almost doesn't make sense. It has 23 scenes, which are all in different places. The multitude of characters, you don't know who they are. It's very difficult to cope with. And it was also banned from performance, from actually being staged on stage, until basically Mussorgsky already chosen it and started writing an opera. Only then it was performed. But people knew it, they read it, and they admired it, because it was also such a powerful piece of writing. And the idea of Mussorgsky was to basically set as many Pushkin's lines to music. So this tragedy is in iambic pentameter, is in the same way as Shakespeare wrote his verse tragedies. And so Mussorgsky also sets basically this iambic pentameter into music. You can, if you listen very carefully, you can sometimes hear these phrases, which are kind of rounded in this way. Yeah, so, and of course, you know, what Mussorgsky did with it is much more dramatic and much more kind of coherent, because he's focused it on Boris. Yeah, so we don't actually have the original ending. So he really creates a very coherent drama of Boris's conscience, but not even so much of that, but about, you can still see, well, you saw this, the stage is split, yeah, about power versus the people. That's basically the main conflict here. And what power does to people. And how people can be seduced or can be deceived, and eventually they start sabotaging the rule of this, you know, leader, and then they unseat him one way or the other, sometimes very violently. So that is the story.
Well, that's a lovely place to end, I think. Thank you so much, Marina. We're going to hear more about Richard Jones' productions shortly. Thank you for that brilliant introduction.
Thank you.
Well, we've learned quite a lot, I think, about the history of this dark and brooding drama, and now it's time to hear some more music. We're going to hear next from Chief Repetiteur Susanna Stranders, who will be guiding us through some of the highlights of Mussorgsky's score. I'll hand over to Susie now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here, especially after a very long day of rehearsals. It's going really well, and considering it's not a particularly long opera, it's surprisingly intense, actually, requires an awful lot of concentration, and I think we're all feeling a bit fried. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here, and I'll just share a few thoughts with you over the next few minutes. Boris Godunov is one of the most important and powerful Russian operas in the repertoire, but it comes with its challenges. The main one being that there are just so many versions of this score. Here at Covent Garden, we are presenting the 1869 version, which is believed to be Mussorgsky's first complete version. But even this has its challenges. Every conductor that approaches it is obliged to make lots of decisions and make their preferences about phrasing, articulation, how to connect fragments, how to connect sections, tempi, dynamics. There are just lots and lots of question marks throughout. Now, I'm chief repetiteur on this show, and I worked on it the very, very first time when Tony Pappano conducted it. I worked on it again in the first revival with a conductor called Mark Albrecht. And this time I'm working on it again with I have my trusty score, which has seen me through all three of those production periods. But it honestly feels every time like a completely different piece, because Tony's choices were different to Mark Albrecht's choices, which were different to Mark Wigglesworth's choices. And so I'm desperately rubbing out things from last time and rubbing out things from the time before, because I think because of all these different versions, there's no sort of set thing that anybody can rely on. And so Mark was saying today that it's such a challenge for a conductor to find an overall shape and pacing of the whole thing, and that it takes a lot of careful crafting to knit it all together. And I think all these different conductors have found their own ways of doing that. The good thing about that is that it does feel that every performance of Boris Godunov almost feels like a world premiere, sort of fresh and new all the time. Let's talk a little bit about this 1869 version. Well, it runs at about just over 2 hours, I believe, with no interval. and it is comprised of 7 scenes. I love the number 7. I think there's something about it. There's 7 days in the week, 7 colours in the rainbow, 7 notes in a diatonic scale. There's something about 7 which seems, I don't know, sort of a special number. Anyway, maybe that's just me. But there are 7 scenes. Each of these 7 scenes is very contrasting, not just in the venue in which we find ourselves. Sometimes we are at the Kremlin. Sometimes we are at an inn on the Lithuanian border. Then we find ourselves in Boris's apartments, and so on. Each scene is in a very different place. And there's also obviously the cell in the monastery where Pimen is writing his chronicles. But musically, each of these 7 scenes feels like a completely different fabric or a different picture, different tableau. I'm just going to play you now the beginning of scene 1, the beginning of scene 2, and the beginning of scene 3. And I think you'll hear, just from the first few bars of each, how Mussorgsky immediately takes us to a very different sort of musical world. So here's the very opening of the piece. And so on. I'll come back to this music in a little bit to talk a little bit more about its context. The next scene is the very famous coronation music. Now, it's got this wonderful bell-like feature. And it's the most triumphant that this opera gets. But even that has a sense. I mean, I remember Richard Jones describing that as the witch's music. So even the bells, which is meant to be a symbol of something good, has an undertone of something concerning. So this is the beginning of scene 2. Here are the bells. Very different from that rather mysterious phrase that opens the piece. Then, just as one other example, scene 3, we're in the cell, Pimen's cell in the monastery, and we have a very sparse, quite calm texture. So, I mean, if I should just play you the very end of the coronation scene, Slava, Slava, Slava. Slava, Slava. Really loud and quite triumphant, and then so I think you can hear three really beautiful musical expressions, but 3 very, very contrasting qualities and colours and flavours. And I think this is a wonderful thing about how these tableaus have their own sort of story to tell, but it's our job to connect from scene 1 to scene 7 over the course of the 2-hour performance. The other thing to say about the 1869 version is that Mussorgsky moved away from conventional operatic traditions. There are no acts like you might expect in an opera. There's no romantic female heroine or no big love story. There's no virtuosic aria with lots of fast coloratura and scales and ornaments and things. It's very raw. It's without flesh. It's quite crude. And it's because of this that the Imperial Theatre at the time rejected it. Where's our star soprano, they wanted to know. Where's our beautiful, ravishing tunes? Where's all our melody? But I like to think it's because of this rawness, this crudeness, that the work, this version of the work, is so valued and so appreciated today. At least I find there's not an ounce, there's not one note out of place in this in a way, because it's just so taut. So this direct emotional truth that the 1869 version offers us, how does Mussorgsky sort of show us this truth through the music? Well, the first thing to say is this is not a piece about heroics. This is a piece about ordinary people. I know my esteemed colleague William Spalding from the chorus is a chorus master, is going to come and chat with Sophie a little bit later about the role of the chorus in this work. But it should be said that they are far from being any sort of background feature. They are a protagonist in themselves. They are at the front and center of the drama. And the Russian people and their plight is what Mussorgsky wants to paint for us. I'm going to return to the beginning of the piece and play you a little bit more of it. That little theme I played you, it's the bassoon that opens the piece. It's like a little folk-like melody. It's very simple. It has quite a narrow melodic range. It's quite slow. It's quite dark. And as it develops and evolves, we then get a repeated rhythmic motif, an ostinato, which goes on. And right from the start, we can feel, well, I certainly can feel, the oppression and the suffering of these people. So I'm going to just play again from the beginning of the piece into some of that rhythmic music that happens a bit later. Just repetitive, oppressive motif that just keeps going. So ordinary people, Russian people, he wanted the truth of this land. The other thing that's very important to say about this piece is because we don't have the big romantic arias that we're used to in Italian opera, what we do have is very speech-like vocal writing. It's very declamatory, and Mussorgsky wants it to sound as close to ordinary Russian speech as possible. So that is a very big challenge for our cast because many of them are not Russian speakers and I've had to work extremely hard to get inside the text so it has a natural inflection which sounds, as I say, as close to ordinary speech as possible. But it's also a challenge for the conductor and the orchestra or the repetiteur to accompany, because I'm a big believer that all quavers are equal, but some are more equal than others. And when you have something that is so text-led, out of this text comes rhythm. And it's rather like a long piece of elastic which has to be stretched and pulled and so on and so forth, because every word and every sentence requires micro-timing to make it sound natural. Does that make sense? So although Mussorgsky is setting within bar lines, quavers, semi-quavers, etc., there's so much more finesse going on to make the Russian sound natural. And no one bar feels the same as another. And again, Mark Wigglesworth has been very honest about saying that this is a huge challenge, especially for us people where maybe Russian is not something that we speak every day of the week. So really trying to find a way into that. In a second, I'll invite Bryn to come and sing some of his monologue for you from scene 5, and you'll hear the wonderful way that Bryn sings this, exactly this thing about finding, give the flow, the ebb and the flow of this Russian language, which has taken him, I'm sure, many, 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 many hours of sweat and blood to master, sweat and tears, or whatever the expression is. So these things are the ordinary people, the declamatory speech-like rhythms is something that Mussorgsky was really keen to help in this quest to show a really true slice of life, of Russian life on stage. Now, before I invite Bryn, I just wanted to touch on a couple of other bass roles. This is a big cast, actually. There's lots of singers in this, lots of small roles. As I said, no big soprano role. There are some female voices in it. There's Boris's daughter, Ksenia. There's a soprano role. There's Ksenia's nurse. And there's also our wonderful Sue Bickley, who's singing the hostess of the inn, a mezzo-soprano role. So we do hear occasionally a female voice, but this is very much, and obviously there are women in the chorus as well, but this is very much about the male voice types, I would say, and I think that Mussorgsky writes brilliantly for the bass voice. Now, Pimen, I played you a little bit of the opening of that scene. He's this old monk, and his music it has a noble, contemplative, calm quality to it. This is somebody he's seen it all. He's written down in his chronicles all the history of everything he's seen. And the music feels more settled. It just feels that there's a home, a sort of a safe place, and this is somebody that has this stability. I'm just going to play one phrase from his scene. I'm not going to try and sing it because you don't want to hear my P-men, believe me. But just it's a 4-bar phrase, D major, and very, very, as I say, just simple and calm. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's quite chant-like. We know we're in this sort of world of sort of religioso. So that's P-men. He's one of the bass roles in the piece. Then I had to introduce you to Varlam, who appears in scene 4. Now, this is a man of the people. And he has turned up at the inn, and he's had a few drinks, and he's having a whale of a time. And he sings a really quite boisterous song. It sounds quite like a folk song. And I would say it's the hardest thing in the piece for me to play. I still haven't mastered it, and that's playing the piece 3 times, but I'm still working at it, ladies and gentlemen. But Varlam, and thank goodness we have him, because it offers us just a moment of comic relief, because the rest of the piece is pretty intense and quite dark. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of Varlam's song. This is about the only set, I said there are no arias, but this is about the only set piece in the opera. And it does come up in auditions sometimes, but this would probably be about the only thing that you could take out of context, really. Let me see if I can find it here. Here's the scene. Gosh, even looking at it is intimidating. So he's had a few drinks, and he's having, he wants to sing about the battle in Kazan. So... Kakva gorata bilata Kazani. Konzi tsara da privata lesi. It's quite, thank goodness we have something sort of, you know, and my wonderful friend Alistair Elliott is playing with spoons as he, yeah, it's worth coming just for this song, if nothing else. It's fantastic. Which brings us on to Boris. I mean, this piece is essentially about the inner turmoil of Boris Godunov. And we hear this poor guy riddled with paranoia and guilt open up his innermost thoughts to us. And Bryn is going to sing for us in a second his monologue where, as I say, we get to see inside this paranoia. The music, unlike the P-Men, which I played for you, which seemed sort of quite sort of, I don't know, poised and settled, Boris's music never settles. It goes through endless keys, and there's lots of low, rumbling, chromatic music. He tries to say something, and then that never quite resolves, and then he tries to say something else. It's very dark. It's very, you really feel like this is a tormented soul. And when we finish this little excerpt we're doing, you'll see that it doesn't have a sort of an ending. It's rough around the edges because this man, there's sort of no way out. And so I would like to finish by just saying in Boris Godunov, there's no triumphant, heroic music. Ladies and gentlemen, Mussorgsky wants us to see the truth and take the truth with us and do what, you know, find a way into the piece through that. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Bryn Terfel to come and sing. This singing this very difficult role in this aria.
I sing this monologue sat on a chair for half of it, so I thought I'd have to have the chair.
Mm-hmm. It's page 99, I know that.
Svoj narod, da vojství slávě uspokojit, šedrotami ľubov jeho sniskat. No отложил пустое попечение, поскольку безумными, когда народ не плескал, я Oh! pace. Och na ziemią na żubrat, narod Izrael muczeniach i zniwaja. Kawalier krzyczy mężczyznicy, jest lota Sepalem. Im zyskal roboty, ani zmienia, jest noja stratinary. Żadny rodny, że do niej strelil, i wietra zniosie chocialki laczuszki. Ja wystроили новые жилища, я одежды Росталин. Я пригрел, я приютил их, они с меня пожаром упекали. Вот черный суд. В семье своей амнил найти отраду, готовил дочери веселый брачный пир. Моей царевне голубке чистой. Не судил Господь, не того тещения, как буря смерть, он ночит цениша. И тут лукавая Марфа виновником дочерней отосла, шептала: «О, Боже праведный, меня несчастного отца! Кто не умрет, я всех убийца тайны. Я отравил сестру свою царицу, я ускорил Феодора кончину, я отрока несчастного, царевича малютка.
What a wonderful taste of what Mussorgsky's score has to offer. That was Bryn Terfel singing the title role of Boris Godunov, in case you hadn't realized. As we heard earlier this evening, Mussorgsky's opera tells the story of the Russian Tsar who reigned during the time of troubles. It also depicts the rise of as Marina said, one of 4 false Dimitris who seized power as pretenders to the throne. This was a period, excuse me, of great turbulence in Russian history, with dynastic power struggles, famine, civil strife, and international conflict. We're going to hear a bit more now about the characters at the heart of the drama. To tell us more, please welcome back Bryn Terfel and Andriy Klimach, joined by some of their fellow members of the cast, Don Dashak and Adam Palka. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it's an exceptionally busy time for you all. I was actually lucky enough to sit in on a rehearsal early this morning, and I know that's about the 8th time Bryn has sung that particular aria today. So yeah, it's a real privilege to have you all here, so thank you so much. Let's start with you, Bryn, if you have caught your breath now. You're singing the title role in this opera. We've heard a bit from Marina about Boris Godunov as a historical figure, but from the inside, from the operatic Boris, how do you understand him? Is he a tyrant, a victim, a pragmatist, or all of the above?
Actually, he was a very good Tsar that had lots of changes, tried to modernize Russia, brought in people to teach from other countries. He would have been a good Tsar now, these days. But there was always that troublesome turmoil that he had, and those rumors about killing who was supposed to be the Tsar. And may I add, I know a little bit about coronations now, having sang in King Charles's, and the pomp and ceremony and the brilliance of the jewels, the swords, the diamonds, the rings, the hats. When I sing this coronation now, there is a turmoil within me myself. I see the piercing glazes of the eyes of the people, of the boyars. They really do not trust Boris. So from the onset of his short reign, he had that to face, of course, and then it was too much for him. So he's pushed over the edge, in a sense. And the journey from the coronation to the death is quite engaging. It takes over my life. And as Susie said, you work hard on trying to get the Russian as close as possible as you can, but you're always looking at the Russian coach, which is sat in the rehearsal, and when his head goes down, you forget your lines. So I try not to, I don't know what about you, I try not to look at Sasha. So that is exactly how one feels in Boris. And of course, he loves his daughter, he loves his son. Those small moments that I have with them, I hope there's an outpouring of love, but also twinged by a terrible sadness as well.
Amazing. Andrei, we got to hear you sing a little bit of your role earlier this evening as the Boyar Shelkalov. Could you tell us a little bit about that moment at the start of the opera and who your character is within Boris's court?
I mean, in this particular production, actually, my role became bigger than traditional, yeah? Because literally in this production, Shelkalov helps Boris to get throne. That's why, like, my role became much bigger than just to say, because literally aria is about that Boris don't want to accept this throne, and let's go all pray to God that he will accept this throne.
So you get a kind of promotion in
this
production.
Yeah.
Lovely. Great, and I guess, and at the start as well, you're addressing the chorus, but you're addressing all of us.
To all people, actually, I mean, first, actually, like Orthodox, yeah? First word is Orthodox because everyone is Orthodox, and literally it says to all people who, and that pray for this, that he will take throne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, Adam, you're performing as Pimen, a hermit. He's a chronicler of history based deep in the bowels of the Kremlin. What is his role in the drama? Is he a kind of witness? Does he have a warning for Boris?
Well, in libretto, he's just like a monk who's writing down the stories that he've already seen, and he also tells the story to the young monks in a monastery. And we could just stop over there, but particularly in this production, which makes it much more interesting, our director find another level on that, to add another level to that character. So Pimen was also a warrior. He also fought in some wars, and he's seen a lot of atrocities, and he doesn't like Boris at all. And he is also radicalizing the young Grigori. So his mission is to push, he's a part of the plot, so his mission is to push Boris off the throne, because he believes that the Tsars before him, they were great. And right now, Boris is the evil one, is the bad one that Russia should not have. And he's just plotting against, with my fellow colleague, with Mussorgsky. He's plotting against Boris.
So a monk on a mission.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
And John, so you're performing Prince Mussorgsky. We were talking a little bit about traitors earlier on, but could you talk a little bit about who Mussorgsky is? Is he a survivor, an opportunist, a villain, or something more ambiguous?
Yeah, it just occurred to me, if anyone's seen the TV series Traitors, And I've been watching it whilst I've been here in London, and I think Mussorgsky would definitely be a traitor in that series. No, any good political story needs real politicians. I think Mussorgsky is a kind of typical snake in the grass politician. He's from the upper classes, the gentry, so he feels like it's really his position to become Tsar. And I think he despises Boris because Boris is kind of new and forward-looking and not nobility, really. So he feels that his real place is where Boris is, and he's trying to do anything he can to undermine Boris's position without getting himself in too much trouble. And I think they're based on real characters, so that if you look, just a simple search about my character, he is a prince, and he did actually become Tsar a few years later. And he swung whichever way the wind blew. He would support Boris, at the same time undermine him. And then when Boris died, his son took over, but suddenly died within a few months. And then he's behind the false Dmitri, or Grigory, whatever you want to call him. And he then came to the throne as Tsar. And within a year, I think, he was then murdered. And who became Tsar then?
Waiting in the wings.
He wasn't really respected as a Tsar. I mean, I think Boris was, but Mussorgsky became Tsar for maybe 4 or 5 years, and nobody really took him seriously. He became Tsar by default.
Okay. You were talking about the sort of rivalry or the machinations that your character is subject to. And so much of Boris's story is shaped by these forces of guilt and grief and fear. I mean, how do you approach portraying a ruler who's got such power but is so haunted at the same time?
Oh, that's quite easy, because in the music it tells the story immediately. So not to overplay the darkness in a sense, and you can see the scenes that we rehearsed this morning, that there is a specific journey, and there are points where he is pushed over the edge, and specifically by those two over there. And we all know what they even wanted. And as I said, Boris, from the beginning, it was always a losing battle. Even the good that he brought, you know. And in a time of terrible famine, where houses were burnt down, he tried to spread the gold to build new houses. But that defining moment of what he maybe did to get away from being a boyar to being a Tsar.
The price of power. Adam, maybe we could talk a little bit about your character and how it connects to this theme of religion in the opera. I mean, he represents faith in a sense, but also truth. I mean, how is it?
Yes, but I would say it's like his faith. He believes that he's doing something right, which other people might judge very different. But he really believes it. He really believes that Boris is not a good Tsar and should not be on the throne from the very beginning. And that's why he's trying to push him over. But the thing is that what he's doing to achieve his goal is also not very noble. So I wouldn't say that he's a man of a faith, like a religious type. He of course believes that his mission is righteous, but actually, yeah, not so much. Yeah.
Cool. And so, Andrei, back to you. So Shilkalov is a key voice. He's a sort of mouthpiece, I guess, a spokesman for Boris's regime. In many ways, he's the public face of Boris's power. But how have things sort of changed by the end of the opera for him?
I mean, of course, he quite disappointed of what happened. I mean, in this production, and actually, Shilkalov and Mussorgsky, they have all the time some kind of conflict, because Shilkalov understands his game and try to manage everything in good a way. But yeah, what happened, yeah.
And then lastly with you, John. Your character is often seemingly giving kind of information, but there's an agenda behind it. How do you approach that in your performance, in your interpretation?
I think if you watch politicians even now, it's quite easy to kind of reenact the way they're acting. He's like a kind of cross between Peter Mandelson and Nigel Farage, really. It's not so difficult to imagine, even now, this kind of thing happening behind the scenes. And I think you'll see in this, Richard Jones, I know Richard Jones, I've known him for many years, I've done quite a few of his productions. And this is a typical, I would say, typically Richard Jones type of production. He's very musical, and he uses musical cues for certain things that happen on stage and uses them very cleverly. It's just a gift that he has. He just senses it. And almost like leitmotifs in Wagner operas, he has certain movements which happen again and again. I don't want to give the game away, really, but I think it has an effect on the audience that they realize this is something that has been... There's a kind of stress there that comes from the way the production works, and the pressure is all on Boris. And it helps to accentuate the pressure that we're putting on him by seeing these things happening again, and that he can't escape it.
Yeah, the visual motifs. I think
Yeah, visual motifs.
Fascinating.
Exactly.
I think we could talk endlessly, but we only have a little bit more time now. I just want to thank you all so much. We can't wait to see this on the stage, and wishing you all the best for the ahead of opening night. Thank you very much. Well, it's been brilliant to hear from some of the singers who are helping to bring the story of Boris Godunov back to the stage. Our evening is almost over, but we've not quite reached the end. It's time to learn about one final crucial character, which Susie already alluded to, and that is, of course, the chorus. Now, as a representation of the people, or the narod in the score, the chorus shapes the action as much as actually any of these four characters that we just met now. So to close the evening, I'm delighted to be joined by chorus director William Spalding. William, thank you so much for joining me and for being here.
My pleasure.
Could you tell us, whereabouts are we in the rehearsal process with the chorus at the moment?
We are at the concluding phase of what is sometimes called the blocking rehearsals, the studio rehearsals. You can't go on to this time on the main stage is, of course, limited, and so you don't want to be wasting that time with movements and arranging the positions on stage that could be done in not the actual space. So we're finished, almost finished blocking. The musical preparation is done. The linguistic preparation, is done, and we go on stage next week.
Wow.
On the main stage.
Adding the magic bit by bit.
Right.
And so it's more than our normal chorus, isn't it? I mean, we've got how many more people are there, and where do you start with, rehearsing such a huge piece for them?
Well, several questions. In terms of the numbers, the regular chorus, the in-house, the permanent chorus of the house is 45 in number. The in-house chorus, the permanent chorus, is numbered 45, and we have extra choristers, 35 of those, so there's 80 altogether. But we also have 20 children who are involved in the production, and so in the biggest scenes, you'll see 100 singers on stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get to your
great.
Bang for your buck with this one. Amazing. Now, the chorus in Boris Godunov is often described, as I've mentioned, as a kind of principal character in its own right. From your perspective, what role does it play in the drama?
Well, you're asking me to define a role, and there is a role, and that is essentially the same as in any other opera, namely that they, when you go to the theater, you make a decision, you go, and you're an individual, you have a personal interest. And as an individual, you observe the principal characters and you identify with them to a certain extent. And would I do that? Would I not do that? Is that good? Is that bad? But when you're sitting in the theater, you're also a member of a crowd. And the chorus articulate that part of you when they're on stage. And they do that, of course, in all kinds of reactions to what the principal characters do. But they also have not just one role, but many different ones. There's really everything in this opera, everything from quabbling neighbors to pious blind pilgrims entreating a higher power, kind of half-bored citizens exiting the cathedral, talking about the latest rumors, and there's the boyar scene, but most significantly and unfortunately, starving masses.
Mm. And so there's some quick changes in there, aren't there? I mean, I was in a rehearsal last week where I think the chorus were told they had to shift from being the chorus that Shilkalov is addressing at the start to then becoming Boris's coronation choir. And I think they have between 1 minute and 3 minutes to completely transform.
Yes, they have to construct a special, place for them to change costume from the one scene to the other. And there's no getting around that because it's actually in the text, because the pilgrims, they come on and they say, no, dress in your Sunday best and go greet the new Tsar. So, it's actually mandated in the text that they change clothes in that short time.
And so those crowd scenes are especially striking in this opera. Just in that opening scene, what I found really fascinating was seeing the level of detail that goes into making the chorus look like they don't want to be there. They're a kind of motley crew. And what's unusual about that opening scene, and could you just talk a little bit about that they're supposedly asking Boris to take the crown, but that's not quite all there is to it, is there?
Right, they have to be kind of bullied into that stance. The constable is, kind of forcing them, get on your knees and entreat Boris to accept the Tsar's crown, and you get, lots of squabbling, lots of, kind of minor issues between the various groups. The ones who are, what's going on here, and no, and then the baritones in a slightly brighter, more optimistic voice. Oh, we're getting a new Tsar, And so there's these frequent changes of texture in that first scene.
Yeah, and that's something unique about Mussorgsky, isn't it? That he doesn't just write for the chorus as a kind of hegemonic kind of mass. There are these differentiated roles within it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm always fascinated with the way he writes for the tenor and bass voices, but particularly, the first tenors and the second tenors. We speak of just tenors, all of them together, but actually he writes differently for the first and the second, and it's not just a matter of range. We'd think, the first tenors are the ones with the high Cs and so forth. I mean, in the Royal Opera Chorus, the second tenors also have high Cs. It's not really about range mainly. It's about color of voice. The second tenor is darker, and they get the darker phrases, and then the second basses, have the weightier. The weightier music, and the darker, more sonorous melodies, and the baritones, markedly more optimistic and heady head voice, and it's a source of endless fascination really for me, and it's just the joy of my life to coax these things out and to work on details like that with the Royal Opera Chorus. I mean, you have no idea. They are just off the charts. It's incredible being in the same rehearsal room as them, I can confirm, let alone the same theatre.
On that note, could you talk a little bit about musically, what are the biggest challenges for the chorus in this opera? Is it about the language, is it the intensity, or just the sheer volume of music?
I'd say there are chorus operas with more music to sing than in Buddies. Well, we're talking about the version that we do. There's another version of Boris where kind of it would be hard to find more music. No, I'd say the amount of, excuse me, the amount of music to sing is not what makes it particularly challenging. I would say the language. The language is the character of the music is deeply embedded in the language, and so it's extremely important. Even though very few of us really, speak Russian, I don't, for example, either. I mean, there are a few that do, but you learn it, and through the experience with other languages, other foreign languages, because they sing in essentially 6 languages. Because lately Czech has been more standardized. There's the language, but I would also say the emotional intensity of certain scenes. That's the bread scene is remarkable. Actually, for its brevity,
That's the
it
scene
has
where
this.
Could you just explain what was happening in that scene towards
Boris
the end?
exits the cathedral, and they essentially scream at the top of their lungs at him for bread because they can't feed their families, and it's of course, unfortunately, an all too familiar spectacle on our screens today in real life. And it just hits home like very, very few other moments in any opera really that I can think of. It just they approach him carefully at first, kind of apologizing for speaking to him directly, and it's kind of soft and beautiful, but then it gets darker and darker, and at the end they're screaming. They are screaming. They get the brass coming, and it's unlike anything else, really. Yeah. Where you need those numbers of singers too.
Yeah, for it to truly kind of hit you. It's a visceral kind of thing, isn't it?
If anything's visceral, that scene is. Yes.
Yeah. And are there any highlights or anything else that you'd particularly like the audience to listen out for in the score from the chorus perspective?
Yes, I would say something that's perhaps not quite so obvious if you're, especially if you're taking in the production for the first time. It's a passage where they're not on stage at all. It's an off-stage chorus, and it's one of the most beautiful prayers that in all of opera repertoire, and you can hear it pretty well because there's not a whole lot of orchestra going on, and you don't see them, but you can hear them.
That's towards the end of the opera? Is that
no,
right?
There's something similar at the end too. No, this is in the Pieman scene.
Okay, yeah.
This is in the Pieman scene.
So early on, listen out.
Yeah.
When
Do
you see
listen
a monk.
to that towards the end of the Pieman. I mean, it's just
glorious.
No words.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you, William. And we can't wait to see the chorus in action in just a few weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Well, this has been such a fascinating peek into the world of Mussorgsky's opera. And sadly, that's all we have time for this evening. But I'm sure none of us can wait to see this opera on stage in just a few weeks' time. Boris Godunov opens on the main stage here at the Royal Opera House on the 29th of January. And please visit our website for tickets and more information. I'd like to thank all of our guests this evening, including Marina, Susie, Bryn, Andri, John, and Adam, and of course, William. And thank you to our audience here in the Claw studio and to those of you watching online. We hope you've enjoyed this insight supported by Rolex. Good night.